Welcome to Driving Safety. My name is Courtney Page, and I'm the training consultant here at SOAR. Thank you for attending this class virtually, and we look forward to seeing you all in the future in a classroom setting again. First and foremost, this is not a defensive driving course. I'm not here to teach you how to drive or get in the nitty-gritty of every single traffic law in Texas. But more importantly, I'm here to bring attention or awareness because a lot of times we get in the motions of everyday life and become so complacent when driving. We get in a rush, we get comfortable, and sometimes even feel invincible. So this class is geared to bring attention to maybe some bad habits we've probably gained over the years and to bring attention to those dangers and even shine some light onto how we can change those bad habits. So first, let's talk about some statistics to just put into perspective just how often accidents happen. Here are some statistics from 2018 or the 2018 crash breakdown. I like to look at stats to really help set the stage. So here we have one person killed every 2 hours and 25 minutes. One person injured every 1 minute and 7 seconds. One crash occurred every 58 seconds. 249,000 plus injuries. And 3,639 fatalities and no deathless days. Like I mentioned, I like to look at stats because it really helps set the stage for just how important this safety course really is. I recently updated this slide with stats from 2018, and although every stat went down, so did the time, meaning there is less time in between fatal and injury-sustaining accidents. But I really like to point out here the no deathless days. There has not been a recorded deathless day since November 7th, 2000. But this all should be pretty interesting once we see how the breakdown happens for 2020 when we've been in this or have had these stay-at-home orders put into play. However, with less traffic on the roads, we're starting to see people tend to be speeding more in 2020 or during this pandemic. So it'll be really interesting to see that breakdown when we're able to view those stats. However, let's look at a little bit more stats. So motor vehicle crashes. Crashes are the fourth largest cause of death in the U.S. And the cost of motor vehicle crashes in Texas totaled $4.89 billion in 2013. Now, I wanted to go over these stats again after I made this PowerPoint, and it comes to find out that now the crashes are actually the third largest cause of death in the US. So they've actually increased. And after I found that out, I actually did some more research to bring into light, what does that exactly mean? And actually, what I came to find out was more Americans have died in car crashes since the year 2000 than in both world wars combined. That's both wars. And I don't know about you, but when I'm driving on the road, I don't want it to feel like I'm going to war. But the fact is, it is dangerous out there, which is why this course is so important, to do our best and make it that much less dangerous. But what about our Texas roadways? So the Texas roadways. So each year, more than 3,000 people are killed on those Texas roadways. And on average, more than 9 people die every day on Texas roadways. So these stats are pretty intense. However, on a more positive note, is you can see these stats are from the National Safety Council, and they say that we've been taking measures to lower these numbers on a daily basis. And they actually blame the lowering of these stats on the 3 E's. What do they mean by the 3 E's? The 3 E's are enforcement, education, and engineering. So enforcement's going to be like our police officers and our patrol cars. And as much as we hate those speed traps, it's obvious why we need them. They help us be more safe when we're not taking it upon ourselves. So I know we don't like to pay our tickets or get in trouble or be pulled over, but they're there for a reason and they're helping us be more safe. And then you have education. It's like this course we're doing right now. We have moments that we continue educating ourselves and spreading knowledge of new stats and laws as well as provide skills to help us be more safe while on the roads. However, the most important thing when it comes to education is to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable. We want to make sure that we are keeping ourselves informed on new laws and even new construction so that we can be as safe as possible. And then with the last E, engineering. That's all the cool stuff. Like things they add to cars to help make them safer, new highways and roundabouts. And once again, those little gadgets or add-ons that make us safer, like backup cameras or different things with technology. But with those 3 E's, brings us to our next graph. Just take a second and look at this graph. You can see human factor is about 89%, road environment factor is 34%, and then vehicle factor is 12%. And they don't all add up, but that's because they overlap. Sometimes, we can have a human factor and a road condition factor. So they all overlap. But the main point here is the obvious: almost 90% of accidents are from human error. Basically, at the end of the day, it's us, people, humans, that are causing these numbers to be so high. So therefore, it starts with us to make sure we decrease those numbers the best way we can. I really just see this so shocking. Like I mentioned, the first thing someone says in an accident is, well, it was unpreventable, or I couldn't have stopped it. But from an engineer standpoint, almost everything is preventable. So why is human factor so high? Then you can see there are vehicle factors, which is your tires and brakes. These two in general create the most fatalities, but there's multiple things that can go wrong with a vehicle, but tires and brakes are the main ones, and we'll talk about those as well. And then road conditions. And this is anything, anytime, but there's going to be more dangerous times to be on the road, such as dawn and dusk, or 30 minutes right after it finished raining, especially in Texas when there's oil and grease and heat that really make it difficult or put us more susceptible to skidding or hydroplaning. So there's always different times that are going to make it more dangerous to be on the roads. But let's look at more so on this human factor, because that's a big number, that 90%. All right, just take a look at this graph. It really helped me understand a little bit, but I hope it helps you understand just how effective that human error can really be adjusted to help the amount of accidents we see on the road. But lucky for you, you're actually in this state mandated course, so you're doing your part and not slipping into the mindset that because you've been driving for so many amount of years, then you're a better driver than someone that just passed a driving test. Actually, based on this graph, it looks like as soon as we pass that driving test, we tend to start slipping into maybe some bad habits, getting more comfortable, and forgetting just how important it is to make sure we keep our hands at 10 and 2. But more so with this, it says your knowledge of the traffic laws. So not just saying becoming complacent or getting too comfortable or feeling like you're invincible, but the fact is, were you aware that now it's illegal texting and driving? Of course you do. Because it was all over the news and we were intrigued because maybe it affected us in certain ways, but unfortunately, they don't make public service announcements every time a new law is passed. So with that being said, I just want to make sure that you take it upon yourself to make sure you're staying educated and following the laws out there that are made for a reason to help us be safer on the roads. So here we have different risk areas. These are the main ones, not in entirety, but these are the 4 main ones when it comes to human factor. And obviously, there's a lot of risk when it comes to driving any vehicle. And I do like to point out that driving is truly a privilege, which is why they have an age requirement for attaining your license. It is to ensure that we have the cognitive ability to make good decisions and make those good decisions quickly. When it comes to driving, there's going to be multiple what-if scenarios we run into. Get that? And there will be different answers to the what-ifs depending on the situation. But the most important thing we can do is to make the safest choices in our particular situation to basically avoid the most amount of damage, whether it be physical, emotional, or even when it comes to deal with money. We will look into each of these risk areas individually, along with other safety topics when it comes to driving and maintaining your vehicle as safely as possible. But first, I want to take a look at something we're probably all a little bit familiar with, which is distracted driving. Paying attention. And I'm not talking about just right now during this course, but more so distracted driving in general. And this is a huge problem when it comes to everyone's safety on the road and not realizing just how distracted we can really be that puts so much potential harm in our way. I mean, it includes texting, passengers, billboards. I mean, just the other day I saw a billboard that said, make sure you're not distracted. That really, what does that do for us, right? But there's kids and radio and AC, and I mean, those are more of the obvious ones, but there's actually 3 different types of distractions. There's visual distractions, which is looking at something else, taking your eyes off the road. Manual, which is going to be your texting or playing with the stereo. And then the cognitive kind. Those are going to be your deep thoughts, like work or personal issues. And we'll break those down individually, but before we get into all of those different distractions, let's look at just how many crashes are documented by distracted driving. All right, so these numbers are still from 2016, but I did want to use them to illustrate the number of crashes that have been faulted by distractions. And what I really want to point out here is data collection can be very tricky. It's fun, but tricky. And as we all probably know, and like with all of these crashes, they're the ones that have been proven to be caused by distracted driving. Either someone admitted to it, they were caught by someone, maybe a witness saw that they were on their phone or something, that they were distracted. There's a lot of times where people will admit fault as soon as an accident happened, like, I'm sorry, I looked down, or anything. So these are the ones that have been able to be documented. And I share that because some of these numbers are really high. If you look at the ones, especially like in Harris County, but that's the minimum. So these are the minimum amount of numbers caused, or numbers of crashes caused by being just simply distracted. So just keep that in mind here. All right, well, with that being said, I do want to introduce you to a character here. Meet Babylon Betsy. And she's your typical multitasking queen we probably see on the roads every day. I mean, it's your mom or dad with their earpiece in, because, you know, they're technically being hands-free. But now with her hands being free, she's able to dig in her purse and make sure she has her work badge. And then she's able to check her emails from work. She's been waiting on one from the day prior. And then all of a sudden she gets a phone call from her daughter who left her soccer ball in the car, and she needs that one soccer ball for soccer practice. That one she needs. So Babylon Betsy's looking in the bag, trying to feel for this soccer ball that she's claiming is in the back seat rolling around. And just as she was able to find the ball, as she's reaching behind her, she turns around and she's going through a yellow, pink, red light, whatever she called it, and she hit a cyclist. But don't worry, the cyclist is perfectly fine. He's okay. However, when cited for the accident, Miss Betsy over here was just given a failure to stop at a red light. Nothing was mentioned about all the other factors that played in this accident. And now Babylon Betsy, to this day, is out there driving as distracted as can be. So how can we make sure we don't become another Betsy on the road? Well, let's get into more details on just what all can be distracting to a driver. As I mentioned, there's 3 types of distractions, and this is our first one. Visual distractions. This is anything and everything that takes your eyes off the road. So we want to limit these distractions. So they could be looking for items on the floor. Betsy was looking for that soccer ball, checking and adjusting your GPS, changing the radio station or AC controls, or taking in the view, or even doing your makeup. So anything that's taking your eyes off the road is going to be considered a visual distraction. So in order to help with these distractions, because we all know that they're going to happen, but we need to do our best to keep our eyes on the road. Pull over to read directions or to switch directions, and put your phone in do not disturb mode. That's one of those engineering techniques. This is where they allowed you to put it in do not disturb, and guess what? You don't have to worry when somebody texts you that you're like, I don't want them to think that I'm ignoring them, because an automated text message sends back saying, hey, I'm driving, we'll touch base when I'm to my destination. There's all sorts of different settings on your phone, but that's part of engineering and keeping us as safe as possible. However, let's look at the second type of distraction. The second type of distraction are our manual distractions. So Betsy digging through her purse, looking for the soccer ball. It's anytime you take one or both hands off the steering wheel. So I always like to say this is your cool people that have taught themselves to drive with their knees, and you know who you are. But this could be eating and drinking, adjusting your child's seatbelt, smoking, searching through your purse or wallet like Betsy was doing, or turning knobs in your car. I like to say this one, we just want to try and keep, the main one here is our phones. Phones is a big distraction. So keep your phone out of reach. Don't tempt yourself to be on it. Make all adjustments before driving. Know what kind of mood you're in. Are you in a jazz mood? Are you in a country mood, hip hop? Be able to set your music choice prior to leaving, point A to get to point B. And don't reach for items while driving. I always say keep your phone out of reach. That doesn't mean to keep it in your purse in the back seat just to try and put yourself in danger reaching for it a little bit later down the road. It can wait, or if it can't wait, make sure you just pull over to actually get the item instead of trying to do so while you are driving. Cognitive distractions. This is our third type of distraction, and it blows my mind. Get what I did there? Because it's cognitive. It's all about thinking and using your mind. This is when your mind focuses and it starts to drift away into deep thoughts, or when you get from one place to another and you don't even remember the entire car ride. But it also includes talking to another passenger, thinking about something that is upsetting, road rage, we'll get into that, but that's a big one, daydreaming, and then being under the influence of drugs or alcohol. With cognitive distractions, we really, once again, want to avoid those phone calls, even hands-free. Some people will ask, but they're hands-free, but it's still causing you to think of different things. Like Betsy, her daughter called, now she's not focused so much on driving, she's focused on what her daughter needed from her, finding that soccer ball. So stay focused on the road, keep your head on a swivel, and keep your emotions in check. A lot of times I talk about this where if you get into a fight with a spouse, family member, kids, and you're like, I'm going to go drive. I just want to go for a drive. Probably not the best time to go for a drive. How about take a walk instead to cool off? But I know I've mentioned phones a couple times, so I really want to dive into one a little bit more, which is going to be texting and driving. So texting is the most alarming distraction because it involves manual, visual, and cognitive distractions simultaneously. Sending or reading a text takes your eyes off the road for 5 seconds. And at 55 miles per hour, that's like driving the length of an entire football field blindfolded. And now when it comes to this, it kind of makes me really think because, I was able to share with you how Betsy accidentally hit the cyclist and she was obviously distracted. But she also obviously had all 3 distractions. But even though we were able to see how distracted she really was, it's the same type or level of distracted that someone is just sending a text. So I never really thought about that. Betsy seems like she's doing a lot, searching, thinking, looking for work badge. However, by someone saying I was just writing a short, simple text, they don't realize just how distracted they really are. And this falls into an area on how our brain really encodes specific information. So take a look at these pictures. This looks more into what takes place as we encode information from what's going on around us, such as texting or even just receiving a phone call or actually being distracted on anything really. And I like to share this just to show just how much distractions change our perception of reality versus reality in itself. And there's a lot of times where we have distractions in the vehicle or so forth or all around us, and it doesn't cause any harm to us. So we continue to allow distractions while driving or because it saves time or it cuts corners. We're multitasking. But the time that it does cause harm is when you're left to reflect. And when you're reflecting, you may ask yourself, was that distraction really worth it? But then again, what if it's too late to even reflect? We didn't even give ourselves time to change. So that's what this picture's kind of for, to kind of show you on what you're missing out on every day or what distractions really cause. You can tell from the left of reality, I'm able to see signs, I'm able to see the color of the lights, and I'm able to make proper decisions. But the moment I hit that distraction, all of it gets a little bit blurred. So how can we help ourselves with minimizing our exposure to distractions while on the road? Pull over, but do so safely. You don't want to set yourself up for an accident when you're trying to do the right thing. So you want to make sure you have good intentions, you're pulling over to be safe, but positioning your car safely is really key here when pulling over. Lessening distractions. First and foremost, stay calm. And you will see later down the presentation that being calm and not panicking is key when driving. And it's kind of like how I mentioned, keeping those emotions in check. You don't want to get in the car after when you're upset, you're already setting yourself up for not having full control of those emotions. So I know I said passengers are part of the distraction, and they definitely are, but use them. Let them know no rides for free. Let them help you with the GPS. Let them help you if you start getting hot or cold. Let them pick a new song, but tell them what song you want to hear. But utilize your passengers. Know your dials. Get to know your vehicle. I always say, have a relationship with your vehicle. And so it says here, it's important whether it's a new car or one you're unfamiliar with, because it's important to know your vehicle. Use your radio presets. If you don't have a passenger in the car to help choose your music choice, then make sure you have some radio presets set. Usually there's 1 through 6. That way you're not focusing on like what station you're on, or you're limiting the amount of time that you are distracted, because you're still going to be pushing a button for the presets. And then make adjustments before you start driving. Those mirrors, seats, steering wheel, mirrors, all mirrors. Make sure, the windshield wipers work. Look at everything, especially new vehicles. But just build that relationship with your car, because you are trusting that vehicle to get you to your destination safely. Stay off your phone. That's a huge one, and it's one that we talk about often. And people are like, I know I'm not supposed to text and drive, but the point is here that people are still doing it. It's a law for a reason. It's out there to keep us safe, and it's on us to make sure that we're doing so. But cell phone use, so like it mentions, whether texting or talking is one of the biggest distractions out there. So try to put your phone away. You hear a lot of times that if I just didn't have sent that text or make that phone call, maybe somebody would still be here today. And just learn from that, so we aren't having to be adding to that statistic. Be rested and satisfied. Make sure you're planning your trips out accordingly. Make sure you can also stop. So if you're taking a road trip, make sure I'm going to stop here to stretch my legs and grab a bite to eat. Just so you have time. Make yourself, hold yourself accountable to make sure that you're in the best position to be driving a vehicle. But this also goes for short amount of time, and we'll get into the resting part later, but just make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And then set up your GPS before you start driving. This goes for, okay, so we all know the party could change, right? The party was at Babel and Betsy, and now she called and she said it was at Dave's house. That's fine. But just pull over and change location safely. And a lot of times, thanks to engineering, especially if you have a car that has a built-in GPS, you have to be in park anyway to change that GPS. However, it does say if you're a passenger, you can assist, but don't fall into the trap. Be safe and make sure you're changing your GPS location accordingly. But did somebody say the party was moving to Dave's house? Meet Daredevil Dave. So another driver we tend to come into contact with on the road these days might remind us a lot of Mr. Dave right here. Because unfortunately, we can probably think of a time or two that we had some type of run-in with an individual that just wasn't the nicest on the road. And in return, you might have, made some unsafe decisions. Like, for example here, Dave, he was just having a terrible, bad, no good day. But that still wasn't an excuse that he was able to just call into work. So now he made himself late, so he's running late. Everyone is deciding to go 20 miles per hour under the speed limit in front of him, while he's trying to go at least 40 over. So now he's zipping through other cars to try and cut as many minutes, seconds, or anything as possible to get to work on time. He's giving people gestures or telling them they're number one, and he thinks everyone is against him and doesn't know where any of these people learn to drive. Mr. Daredevil Dave here is now acting out of irrational decisions, and in return, not making the most safe decisions when traveling from point A to point B. And literally no one is in the right state of mind like this while driving, and they're not driving the way they should be. Probably leaving themselves feeling a lot like this. So like I mentioned, believe it or not, driving is a privilege. And it is an action that can be or can promote many different emotions and reactions among drivers depending on their own personal situations. And I laugh when I see this quote. Have you ever noticed anybody going slower than you is an idiot and anyone going faster than you is a moron? Because it's so true. We tend to be so fast to judge and criticize other drivers, almost even forcing blame for how bad they really are, how bad of a driver they are. However, what we really should be doing is taking a step back, pause for a second, and reflect on our own driving. Take a look at how we could change our driving to be more cautious. Because the obvious truth is The way other people drive is completely out of our hands. So it's our job to just become more cautious drivers among them. However, sometimes we find ourselves letting other drivers get to us, which causes aggression or tension on the roads. And a lot of time aggression comes from fear. Like Dave here. He was scared of his job, whether it be just running late or maybe getting in trouble. And with that, he was just taking it out on others. He had the urge to take out that fear, and it turned into aggression on the other drivers on the road, which is one good example of how road rage comes into play. All right, road rage. I like to use this slide because, well, I'm an animal lover, as we'll get to, but with road rage, it's actually a whole animal in itself. And I know this, and I felt this. I don't know about y'all, but something that used to always get me on the road is when you're waiting your turn in line in a one, or, on construction, it doesn't have to be construction, but entering a highway, but it's one lane, and all these cars beside you are trying to get over last minute. And where I found myself inching closer to the car in front of me, not caring what I hit or if I was going to hit them, I wasn't going to let them over. But what was really going on here is they were turning my safe driving into road rage. I'm a pretty safe driver, but I was able to, or I allowed the other drivers, not so safe driving, to infuriate me, make me angry, put myself in danger. So with road rage, it's really something that we need to try and control. And that's why I call it an animal in itself, because sometimes we don't even realize it. Sometimes we don't even see just how upset we're getting and for what. But what's so important here is with road rage, the most important thing is you never know someone's emotional state. And not knowing someone's emotional state can really lead to unpredicted endings. When you're dealing with unpredicted endings, you're not sure what that person on the road and the other vehicle has been through all day, but it could have been their last straw. It could have been it could be the icing on the cake to just send them over. And why that's even more important is because people act different when they are behind the wheel. It doesn't matter if it's a car, a big truck, but it helps people think they're even more invincible, that they have a barrier. The same person cussing or yelling or calling you number one probably wouldn't do that to your face, like in a mall or probably in general. They probably wouldn't have a problem with you at all. Some people even know this about themselves and say that they're only angry in a car, and outside they could care less and they're happy as a clam. And this is crazy to me. But the truth is people are more aggressive than they are face to face when they have a car as a barrier. But the important thing to really think about here is aggressive drivers put their lives on the line every time they get in a car without even realizing it. So let's look at this problem just a little bit more. The problem, the top threat to highway safety. Drivers do not identify their own behavior as aggressive. So as I mentioned before, the only way to really tackle the problem of how bad other people are at driving is to focus on ourselves as individuals. Make sure that we are doing our part to minimize the amount of preventable accidents. It starts with working on keeping focus and eliminating unnecessary distractions, but further by controlling our impulsive reactions that cause us to be more aggressive drivers. If we work together and focus on our own safety, in turn, that will limit the amount of bad drivers on the road and possibly even create an overall safer driving environment. Out of all people, I understand time is valuable, but we also know that driving on a highway is something we shouldn't rush because unfortunately there's no rushing in rush hour. So let's be more cautious of those things that we do that other drivers might even see as aggressive on the road and limit those. With that being said, congestion or rush hour is one of the most stressful and boring times we experience while on the roads. No one wants to be sitting in one place at once, not moving any closer to the prime destination. And it's also a time we find ourselves more vulnerable to aggression and time to even be more distracted by our phones. But we're all going to get there sometime. And I like to share this idea, or I guess it's a mindset of, instead of saying I want to make good time, change your mindset to make time good. Utilize your time. Enjoy it. Be safe. When you're not traveling at high speeds and you're sitting in rush hour, that's the time to take in the view. That's the time to look around, just breathe. Don't jump straight to anger. And once again, I know easier said than done, especially if we're running a tad bit late. But these are the times where you really need to understand what gets you, I guess, worked up or aggressive or paying attention to the way or what triggers our emotions. That's going to help us not set ourselves up for angry emotion. 40% of deaths in Texas are caused by aggressive behavior. So overall, this is the overall stat of 40% of deaths in Texas are caused by just aggressive and reckless driving. So like Dave and others on the road, if we can't keep our aggression in check, we're just increasing the number of deaths in Texas. So how can we do our part in minimizing the number of Texas deaths? So aggressive behavior. The two main ways we can help in this risk area of aggressive and reckless driving is going to be two simple factors of limiting our speeding and minimizing that road rage. And this doesn't just mean minimizing our own road rage, but also not giving into others trying to entice your level of aggressiveness. Like I mentioned, the vehicles on my side trying to, get in front of me and getting onto the highway, that was enticing me in that aggressive behavior. But also with speeding. For instance, there's a lot of times we have faster cars that are known to be faster, such as your Mustangs and your Porsches or Ferraris or anything that's known to be a little tad faster than my Chevy Cruze. Well, don't allow them to entice that more dangerous behavior. When it comes to speeding, there's multiple times where maybe you didn't find yourself just speeding caused any harm. However, there's times it takes a matter of seconds or anything to happen when you're going a little bit faster than that posted speed limit that really might change the outcome. For instance, Paul Walker. This accident affected so many people and it really hurt. It reminded us that no one is invincible. And I do know that this accident is a few years old, but the pain is still there. And it's a constant reminder that just speeding or racing can affect anyone. Speeding is one way we can limit our accidents, as I mentioned, when it comes to reckless driving, but just really how do we control that other animal? Road rage. Road rage. Stay calm. No tailgating. No gesturing or cutting people off. Leaving plenty of room, that cushion, and we'll talk about that one later. Accept what you can't change. That's focusing on ourselves and how we are driving and avoiding eye contact. My main point when it comes to road rage is always remember you never know what emotional state another individual is in. So this means you may think rolling down your window to share, a friendly share that you didn't use your blinker this time might be the final straw of their day. And think about the ways people can antagonize you on the road, and let's do our best to minimize those actions we do towards other people. We're all human and we're all going to have things that set us off, but let's remember that people are different behind the car, as I mentioned before. For some reason, they believe they can, that just because they're behind an enormous amount of steel, that they are now 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And they just don't think about their actions until after they're already done. So let's just remember, stay calm and try to create the most enjoyable experience on the road. Try to eliminate your hostile road environment. We don't want to become another Dave on the road. So now let's meet Careless Carl. This is our third character here. And Carl. He can't remember if he closed the garage behind him or if he turned off the stove burner after making himself a delicious omelet before work. So he tends to find himself forgetting things that make him extra safe on the road as well. He can't remember to buckle up or how long his kids need to be in a car seat. He can't remember what to do at a yellow light or what all the road signs actually mean. But does he really realize just how costly even the smallest things that he forgets could turn out? Just like how costly it would be to forget to wear his seatbelt. When it comes to seatbelts, buckling up saves employers $50 billion annually. And the average cost per unrestrained person involved in the on-the-job crash is $27,750. When it comes to seatbelts and wearing seatbelts, I always hear two things. I'm glad I did, or I wish I had, especially when it's with an accident. But you never hear someone say, I wish I hadn't. However, I like to point out, thanks to engineering again, is I called them seatbelt bullies. Now our cars have a little ding, ding, ding noise to remind us to buckle up and be safer on the road. But if the seatbelt bullies don't work, there's still about a $250 ticket when you get caught not wearing your seatbelt. And I know what you're thinking. You might be like, okay, seatbelts, but I also talked about children and keeping them in their car seats and just when are they allowed to be in the normal seatbelts? So let's take a look at that. First and foremost, as you can see here from this slide, a child restraint automatically increases the survival rate from a crash by 50%. Well, that alone wants me to keep my kids in restraint as long as possible. And I know they're annoying and they're heavy and they're bulky and goldfish gets caught underneath them, but they're important. Just by this number, you can see just how important they are. But there are specific requirements for how long our children need to be in a car seat. Child passenger safety in Texas. This is pretty straightforward slide. It says it straight, but kids under 8 must ride in a child safety seat or booster unless they're taller than 4'9". And with the next slide, you'll see we'll go into a little bit more detail, but this puts it straightforward out there for us. Unless you have a really tall 5-year-old or 7-year-old, they need at least be 8. And then if they're taller than 4'9", then it's up to the parent to allow them to not be in that child safety seat or restraint any longer. So this puts it in a little bit more detail, but basically saying the same thing. So all children younger than 8 years old, unless taller than 4'9", are required to be in the appropriate child safety seat system wherever they ride in a passenger vehicle. And so another way of saying this, when a child reaches their 8th birthday, no matter their height, it is legal for the child to use only the adult safety belt in the passenger. But what I like to put out right here is the fact that it's legal, but is it safe? So if you have a child that just turned 8, that may be a little shorter, hasn't hit the growth spurt yet, it's up to the parent to make the decision on whether or not they want to allow them to not be in that passenger restraint seat any longer. And at first I was like, how do we know if it's safe, even though it's legal? And they actually provide a list of a checklist to see just how we should make sure our child is still safe and we make that decision to move forward without a restraint. So you can see here, does my adult safety belt fit my child? Well, here's a simple 5-step checklist. Does she sit all the way back against the seat? Do his or her knees bend easily at the edge of the seat? Does the shoulder belt cross over the center of the shoulder and chest? Is the lap belt low across the top of the thighs? Can he or she stay seated like this for the entire trip? That's the trickiest one right there. I know my kids couldn't, so I'd be like, nope, they're going to be in their restraint as long as possible. But all jokes aside, this is a really good list to really check through with your son or daughter to make sure that they are safe as possible when traveling as a passenger in the vehicle. So what I say here is just double check, make sure we're doing everything to keep our kids safe. It's a parent that kids want to do what they see their parents do. So they want to sit in a regular seat. They want to grow older. They want to, have jobs. We look back saying, stay young as possible. But we've all been there and wanted to be an adult. However, we need to make those adult choices for them, no matter how annoying those passenger restraint seats really are, even moving from one car to another and so forth. But this is a great list to look at and follow to make sure our kids are as safe as possible while traveling anywhere. Car seat inspections. Now, I like to share this because when I was a new mother, I didn't realize there was a wrong and a right way to install a car seat. I mean, it's obvious that there could be a wrong way, but I just thought it was really simple. But I wasn't alone here. And there's actually several places that can offer assistance. Now, this is a short list, and there's more, and you can Google them in your area, but Sheriff's Office, fire departments, Texas Department of Transportation, medical centers, Scott and White, Health and Human Services. When I took my car in to make sure that the car seat was installed right, it was so effortless. I was more nervous than I should have been, but it was painless and so worth it. It really put my mind at ease, and I knew my daughter was at optimal safety when we left the hospital, and actually every car ride after that. Except that one time that she wanted to ride in the back of a pickup truck. So is this legal in Texas? I could have sworn it was. And there are a few exceptions to the law, and we'll get into those in a bit, but the main thing to remember in Texas is this is legal in Texas as long as you're over the age of 18. So if you were 18 and older, you are technically allowed to ride in the back of a pickup truck in Texas. However, like I mentioned, there are a few exceptions to this law, like these. So the exceptions to this, so if you're not 18, you would still be allowed to ride in the back of a pickup truck if it was the only vehicle owned or operated by the members of the household. If it's an emergency situation, so like put a mattress in the back and it was an ambulance situation. In connection with a hayride or a parade, so during the fall time when they do pumpkin patches, that would be fine too for all the little kids to enjoy. On a beach, that's one of my favorites. And if it's a farm worker and they are being transported from one field to another on a farm to market road, a ranch to market road, or county road. Now, however, with that being said, and the exceptions, I just want to share, even though it's legal to ride in the back of a pickup, as long as you're 18, I want to share another reality check with how still important it is to have or wear your seatbelts in a vehicle. I know these aren't easy to look at, but they're so important to revisit. With this accident with Princess Diana, there's actually multiple opinions surrounding this particular crash. I think they mentioned road rage and speeding and paparazzis, but I like to use it as an example of the needs for seatbelts and their importance. They could literally be a life changer. Now, the driver survived this crash and he was wearing a seatbelt. However, it was confirmed that Princess Diana was not. And even though this might not have changed anything, the fact is we still don't know. So seatbelts are there for a reason. Use them. We've reminded careless Carl to wear his seatbelt, keep his kids safely secured. But what about when we asked him what he should do at a yellow light? Well, we asked 5,130 licensed drivers what they should do at a yellow light. Should they go faster, stop if it's safe, don't know, slow down? And 85% of those drivers said they don't know. How scary is that? However, the answer for all of you maybe falling in that 85% is to stop if it is safe. But if you have entered the intersection in any way, so if your tires have crossed the white lines or the plane of the intersection before the light turns red, then you can proceed through the intersection as long as it is safe. And like I mentioned before, every situation is going to be different. But as long as it is safe, then you can proceed through the yellow or pink, I like to call it pink, not quite yet red, light as you travel through. However, we need to make sure we are being extra careful and cautious when driving through intersections. Because in 2018, there were actually 701 people killed in crashes occurring in intersections or related to an intersection. So that's not talking about accidents. That's talking about 701 fatalities. But this has to do with multiple things, not just knowing whether or not to stop at a yellow light, but also with signs and pedestrians, one-way streets, even missing turns. But the majority of these accidents are due to the fact that people are distracted and not giving themselves enough reaction time when going through the intersection. But I mentioned signs. So what about signs? Signs are there to help us. How could they be causing accidents? The fact is, signs can be confusing in themselves. Like this one. I mean, really, what do we do here? Do we stop, not stop? My point is, driving in itself can be a difficult task. There are signs to help us, or I guess intended to help us, but if we don't know what these signs mean or are warning us about, how can we make sure we're doing everything we can to ensure safety while driving? I mean, I also did not realize that when traveling west and east, those numbers are even, and north and south, those numbers are odd. For example, like I-35, it runs north and south, and I-10 goes west and east. So that just helps with directions right there. But I had no idea because I was unaware, which plays into that education piece I talked about earlier, keeping ourselves educated. But the thing is, signs are important. They are there to help, but we need to make sure that we are sticking or keeping up with what they really mean. Like this one. Here's your sign. Talk about signs. Here I would know, okay, I'm trying to park, I'm pulling up. What do I do here? Okay, no parking from 11 to 1. And by the time I'm able to actually park, I don't know if it's allowed by then, making my decision or not. But I like to utilize this to show you just how we're driving as it is, and I mentioned it's a difficult task, and now we're supposed to be reading all these signs as well. Point is with signs is they can unintentionally cause us to be more confused when they're trying to do the exact opposite. And all conditions can affect that. And I like to talk about this with a previous class because think about school zones. With school zones, and I like to bring this up, especially with the times of, well, school's out even for summer or pandemic or any reason, but school's out. If that school light is flashing, you still need to abide by the sign. The school zone sign takes full effect no matter what. And it's not really going to hurt us to slow down to 20 miles per hour for a short amount of distance. And your excuse of I thought school was out isn't going to hold up in court. You never know if they set aside maybe the cafeteria or a room to help with anything, and they call the city to say, I need that sign on during these times. So abide by those school zone signs because they are there for a reason and they do serve a purpose. But more importantly, make sure that we're keeping up and understanding what the signs mean and if they even pertain to us at all. All right, but with signs, what about parking? Are we going to back in or pull through? Well, either way, it's good instead of parking where you have to reverse to get out. Why I say this is because when we're leaving a parking space, there's two things that happen. We're in a hurry, right? We talked about this. We like to cut corners and save time. Time is valuable. So we're in a hurry, but also conditions change. Therefore, say we park next to another vehicle that's the same size and we can get out easily. We can see around it or even get in our car for that matter. But now we came out of the mall or the shopping market or wherever we were, and now there's a huge car parked next to us and we can't see anything until we're completely out of the parking space, and we're relying on somebody to use their horn to make sure that we know that they're there. So when possible and when we're parking, try your best to back in or pull through. This might mean parking a little bit back and getting those extra steps in, but this is going to be the safest way to park your vehicle because when we leave, once again, we're in a hurry and those conditions change and we can't predict those conditions. Night driving. Depth perception, color recognition, and vision are lessened. A 50-year-old needs 2 times more light than a 30-year-old. Now, I'm not sure Carl didn't share his age with me, but he might have forgotten his glasses that helps him see at night. My point is it's harder to see. I myself have issues with call them the starburst lights that are coming towards you, and it just makes your vision might seem a little bit blurry than normal or daytime driving. However, even though Carl might have forgot his glasses, there is something that comes into play with night driving that's not just about your vision being lessened, but more so about maybe to mention DWIs and DWDs. Well, Carl doesn't have an issue with those, just forgetting his glasses, but let me introduce you to our last character, Social Sam. Now, Social Sam, it says it all right here. He's the life of the party. He's out driving, but he had some fun. So he's been out all night drinking and partying on a Friday night after a really long week at work, and he let loose. He had every right to let loose, but maybe he let a little too loose. And now he's overly tired from the long work week and a little bit tipsy and wants his own bed, even though Dave offered to have him just sleep on the couch. So he's decided he waited long enough to sober up and makes that decision to get behind the wheel and head home. And as he makes this already horrible decision to just drive home himself, he gets a text from Babylon Betsy telling him, oh, Daredevil Dave's here and he's attempting to eat 2 chili dogs at once. And he's too tired to turn around. So he goes, oh, no biggie, but you got to FaceTime me for this. So he has this mentality of he can control himself, but even more scary, he has the mentality of it won't happen to me. Alcohol while driving in Texas contributes to nearly 1/3 of fatal crashes. So unfortunately, there are one too many Social Sams on the road these days. But DWI is not something you want to mess with anywhere, but definitely not in Texas. Because like we mentioned, it's the cause of 1/3 of fatal crashes. And with Texas, you have some states, if you're familiar with it, that might have a DWI versus a DUI. But here in Texas, we have just a DWI. So it doesn't matter if it's alcohol, prescription drugs, or recreational drugs or anything. It would all be considered a DWI. What I'd like to share here more importantly is not just yourself being impaired and making sure we're not driving while being impaired, but when we are driving at night, make sure you're keeping yourself safe from maybe other impaired drivers. No normal driving versus impaired driving. So how we'll do that is by knowing the signs of ourselves being impaired and by others being impaired. So let's look at those signs. But first, I want to put this in perspective that every day 28 people in the US die in an alcohol-related crash. That's one person every 51 minutes. And then drunk driving fatalities have fallen by a third in the last 3 decades. However, the chance of being in an alcohol-impaired crash is still 1 in 3 over the course of a lifetime. And look at that last bullet. These deaths and damages contribute to a cost of $52 billion per year. That's a lot of money. But more importantly, a lot of pain and suffering for people and families and friends for something that could have been totally prevented. But now let's get into the signs of what it really means to be impaired. Signs of impairment. So we're going to have, you don't want to drive if you feel yourself like slowing down. You've got dull judgment, hindered muscle control, coordination, affected short-term memory or tracking ability, increased distraction and drowsiness. So that was social Sam to a T, right? Hindered maneuvering ability and inability to recognize traffic symbols. Blurred vision, because it's already going to be a little bit difficult, your vision, that is, driving at night anyway. So we're talking about any signs of impairment. Increased confusion and anxiety. Now, these are all different signs of impairment, and there's going to be ones that affect others because we're all different individuals. So one sign might be worse for one individual than it is another. However, what I like to point out here is a lot of people tend to hang their hat on that 0.08 limit. I like to share this because in Texas, you actually don't have to be at 0.08 or above it in order to get in trouble or get a DWI. You can actually be arrested at any level of intoxication if the officer believes you are unsafe to drive. So yeah, everyone hangs their hat at that 0.08, but I challenge you not to get hung up there. Pay more attention to the signs that we have listed here to help you notice the first signs that you were impaired in any way. But also use these to kind of tell those around us, as I mentioned before, if they're impaired. So if they're going across the lines or not using their blinkers or making weird decisions, stay away from them. Create that cushion around them so we keep ourselves out of danger, because that's one way that we can control an accident that's out of our hands the best way possible. And I like to say here too, I like to share this, that getting a DWI, the vehicle has to be motorized. So you can't get a DWI on a bicycle. However, where they will get you is you can get a PI or public intoxication. And now a new trend here is those new scooters that are going around downtown. They're pretty cool if you haven't tried it. They're awesome. Well, now we're not doing so much because of the pandemic, but I challenge you to get on one of those as long as you're not impaired, because those are being considered in court as getting a DWI. So bicycles, you can't get a DWI, but you can get a PI. But the motorized scooters, they're holding up in court as getting a DWI. So I mentioned DWI, but what about DWD, driving while drowsy? All right, dangers of drowsy driving. So drivers who get less than 5 hours of sleep have a crash risk similar to driving over the legal limit for alcohol. So I mentioned 0.08, that's that legal limit, but less than 5 hours sleeps can put you at the same crash risk to that. Now, here, with that being said, is actually driving while drowsy is in comparison to driving while over the legal limit of alcohol, but it's actually to blame for about 13% of fatalities. But like I mentioned before, getting statistics or collecting data can be tricky. So since we haven't yet invented a handheld like snoozalizer for police to carry in their vehicle, we pretty much have to make an educated guess or use what we have. So somebody admitted to falling asleep, or for some reason they was able to grab that data to have these numbers. What I'm saying here is the 13% of fatalities, that's the minimum number. So the dangers of drowsy driving is that the fact is it's killing people. So know your body. I know we're all going to be tired. We're busy people. We're chasing the American dream. But if you're dozing off at home, you shouldn't think, hey, I'm going to go take a joyride just at that moment. Try another way to kill time if you can't sleep. Remember, count the sheep. But just important part here is know and be aware just how much sleep you're getting. Take care of yourself. Don't overexert yourself and trust yourself behind the wheel just because you have to get somewhere. Really understand the dangers of drowsy driving. Okay, road conditions. So with the help of Betsy and Dave and Carl and Sam, we're all even more aware just how human factors can increase the number of accidents on the road. Not all the time, but they definitely increase that probability of them. And now it's time so that's the human factor. We've solved from those 4 characters that, okay, obviously some of those accidents that they were in probably could have been prevented. But now it's time to look at the other factors that may be out of our hands a bit, that include road conditions and just overall car maintenance that can even further make us safer on the road. I like to take a look at these numbers. So this is dry road versus wet road. I particularly like to go to the fastest. It's the most difference. So take a look at 68 miles per hour on the dry road on our left side of the screen. Reaction distance, it says 151 feet. Braking distance says 220 feet. And stopping distance is 371 feet. Now on a wet road, the reaction distance is the same because reaction time, it takes about 3/4 of a second to take your foot off the accelerator and cover the brake. And that's when that braking distance comes into play. That's going to be a little bit different. So on the wet side of the road, we have 318 feet for braking distance. And then stopping distance is 469 feet. So a total of almost 100 feet difference from a dry road versus a wet road. That's a pretty big difference, especially when you're trying to put enough safety cushion around your vehicle to prevent and giving yourself enough time to stop to prevent different accidents, especially those ones that are like a rear end accident. But I also like to take an effect, not just wet road, not just rain. And I know we live in Texas, so we don't see snow often, but I like to look at snow as well. So we talked about dry road versus wet road, but I mentioned snow. So here is just another graph or illustration it says, find out how long it takes to go from 60 to 0. So on the very far left, that's dry road. So 66 feet is perception time. Oh no, I need to stop. Lights changing colors. And then reaction time to actually brake, 132 feet. And then to the stopping point is 271 feet. Now it shows you the difference between wet roads. This is your rain. That's going to actually take you 333 feet to stop. However, with snow, and I like to share that I mentioned we're in Texas, so we're not lucky enough to see that snow very often, but we get it every once in a while. But that doesn't mean we're not traveling maybe to a different state or different areas of Texas that receive more snow than others. So that makes it even more dangerous. Not only is it more difficult to stop in the snow, obviously 533 feet, but it also, we're unfamiliar with it. So just being aware that when it is different road conditions, whether it's dry, wet, snowy, being aware of giving yourself enough cushion around the vehicle, and that's not just in the front, but in the back and on your sides as well, to make sure that we're driving as safely as possible per those road conditions. We're making those adjustments. Which brings me to braking safety. When stopped, you should see the bottom of the tires of the vehicle in front. This will help you if you are hit from behind. This is pretty straightforward, but kind of the old rule. Now, you want to stop far enough behind the vehicle so you can get around them without having to back up. And at first, I was like, why is this important? But I get it. I see why they adjust the rules, because some sports cars they make these days, you can see underneath the vehicle and be right on top of them. But also, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where a car in front of you maybe broke down or, stopped, stalled or anything, where now you're having to put yourself in reverse, going the opposite way of direction or traffic to get around that vehicle. So make sure when we're coming to a stopping point, we're giving ourselves enough space, enough cushion is what I like to call it, to make sure that we are able to get around them if we need to without putting our car in reverse. Brake maintenance. If you hear squealing or grinding noise or feel vibrations when you brake, have your brake system evaluated as soon as possible. Now, this seems pretty straightforward, but it's so important. We don't want to keep putting brake maintenance on the back burner. And if you talk to like a professional truck driver, and they really talk about listening to their trucks, part of that relationship I was kind of telling you about. They really notice the different sounds, and they don't just notice them, but they do something about it. They find out what's causing them, and we should be doing the same thing. We don't want to keep ignoring them, like, maybe being too scared of like maybe the cost or the time out of without a vehicle. We really want to fix it. It's not like our car is having or under a cold or having a sniffly nose. Something's wrong and we need to take care of it and fix it. So we make sure that we are setting ourselves up better down the road. Just know that when working with your vehicle, listening is key. It'll tell you when something isn't working appropriately, which further keeps us away from brake failure. And I told you we were going to talk about being calm and don't panic, but brake failure, don't panic. Take your foot off the gas to reduce speed. Shift into a lower gear to force a slow down, or use the e-brake or parking brake as your brakes. Don't turn car off until you've stopped, and you will lose power, but you'll lose power steering if you do this. And you want to always signal and call for help. With this being said, in brake failure, I don't want to scare you about brake failure, because brakes don't usually, or they just don't typically go out. Like, it's not just bam and they're done and you find yourself driving off a cliff like you see in the movies. That's why it's so important to pay attention and listen to the noises your brakes are making, or even the feel. If you put your foot on it, sometimes you can feel them getting kind of balled in there. So make sure we're just paying attention to our car so we prevent our brake failure. But we do live in 2020. We know things happen. But like I said, that's why that brake maintenance is going to be so important. But what about if we tend to skid a little bit around the roads? Once again, don't panic. And I know easier said than done, but this is pretty straightforward and simple. Once again, the main thing here is, like I mentioned, don't panic. And there are two types of skids. There's a front skid and a rear skid. And now the front skid is kind of like when you slam on your brakes, so you weren't paying attention like Babel and Betsy, and you didn't realize that the light turned red and you slam on the brakes, but your car still skids all the way up, maybe kind of in the intersection. That's a front skid. And those are a little less dangerous than the rear skids, because the rear skid is when you hit like a wet or greasy surface and you tend to like hydroplane or fishtail, and these can be more dangerous because it gives us more of an opportunity to overcorrect. But the main point to take away is that you must steer in the direction you need the front of your vehicle to go, to basically straighten it up. So for instance, if the rear tires are skidding out to the left, you should steer your front tires to the left too. But once again, don't forget, don't panic. Blowouts. If you're anything like me, this is one of my biggest fears. I just don't like to feel like I'm out of control, and I just personally don't like that. That's why I make sure to have my car maintenance up to date. I'm going to make sure I do everything proactively to decrease any chances of having a blowout. But once again, we're in 2020 and life happens. And sometimes no matter what you do to prevent something, it's out of your control. So what do I do when I find or might find myself in a blowout? Well, I remember this handy dandy course and I don't panic. I'm going to release the accelerator gently, and I say gently because you don't want to overcorrect, but gently correct steering. And the most important thing here is to regain control. You're going to want to decelerate, not necessarily like slam on the brakes, but just decelerate slowly. You're going to want to stay calm. And it might sound like counterintuitive, but the first action you should really take is none at all. Get your thoughts. You'll honestly instinctively want to slam on the brakes, but don't do this. It can cause you to lose control of the vehicle and cause matters to get worse. Instead, grip the wheel tightly and hold it straight. Even though your car will likely start pulling to either side, either the left or the right, don't try to correct it, because overcorrecting could prove to be disastrous. So just stay calm and remember this. Release the accelerator, gently correct the steering as necessary to regain control, not over control. And once you regain control, continue to slow down and safely pull off the road where and when it's safe to do so. Most accidents occur here, but why? Well, it has to do with becoming complacent. There's speeding, there's sleeping, there's passing, blowouts, blind spots, and distractions, of course. But I really want to use this opportunity to talk about passing. When it comes to passing, you really want to have a good visual. Like, leave yourself like maybe at least a half mile or 3/4 of a mile to really pass someone. Make sure the road is clear, straight. And there are multiple laws when it comes to passing with the shoulder and, if it's a dotted line, a solid line. But when it comes to passing, you really want to make sure your vehicle is back in your lane before 1,500 feet of the approaching vehicle. So we want to be out there playing chicken. But more importantly, I like to point out that only pass when it's necessary. Am I really in that much of a hurry? Ask yourself that. And also, another thing about passing is you can ask a truck driver, what they think about passing. And what you'll hear from this is, if you're going to do it, commit to passing and get it done. Don't play, like I mentioned, chicken. But when it comes to these roads, not only is passing a problem, but also head-on collisions. And this could be from, once again, dozing off, not paying attention, being distracted, and veering into someone's lane. But how are we going to stay safe from somebody else coming into our lane? We're going to utilize the 4 R's, which are read the road, ride to the right, reduce your speed, and ride off the road to the right if necessary. And I mentioned the right. Why do we go to the right? Well, that's just because in case we're giving the other person coming head on towards us the benefit of the doubt that they're going to recorrect before something happens. So if they're going to recorrect, they're probably going to go to the right as well. That's why we say always go to the right. But also out here, I want to take a look at a little bit more statistics to see kind of why accidents tend to happen out on roads like these versus in the city or downtown. I mentioned complacency. So take a look at this graph. When I looked at it at first, I was like, okay, blowing dust, weather conditions all the way on the left, blowing sand, snow, clear, cloudy, fog, rain. I immediately went to the rain. I was like, what? 191 of fatal crashes. And then looked at the clear and cloudy, 2908. And I started to think that can't be right. However, from my previous slide, when most accidents occur on roads like that and in daylight and it's clear, it goes back to we become complacent. We get so comfortable. People are more attentive and careful when the weather conditions change because we're aware that it's bad. It's the bad versus the good. When people get too comfortable after a few years or weeks for that matter after driving, then when it's a beautiful and sunny day outside, something tends to make us feel more invincible, complacent, and we make maybe not so safe decisions when it comes to driving or ride with our legs up or not paying as a close attention and definitely not keeping our hands at 10 and 2. We like to point that out because that's a big thing and it's still human error. And that's just pointing out a little bit more that, yeah, rain might be, or different weather conditions or road conditions might have some play into, the increase in accidents, but still human error has a big thing for when, or big effect on when it's just clear outside. Not only is passing and sleeping and becoming complacent and too comfortable something that comes into play on those types of roads, but also wildlife. We're not the only ones on the roads in Texas, that's for sure. And if I like to mention here, littering. You'll see those cute little signs where it says, don't mess with Texas and littering fine like $500. But that means anything. So littering outside your vehicle is anything you throw out. Even something like a French fry or a banana peel or leftover hamburgers on a road trip. And guess what? You're bringing that wildlife to and closer to the street. So I like to share that because a lot of times they're like, well, I'm not littering because it's not going to stay there, but think about the bigger picture. Then we have deer, or squirrels, or possums, or armadillos coming closer to the roads. We're harming them, and I'm an animal lover. But what happens when the animals do come close to the street? Here we have to swerve or not to swerve. So if a deer is in your way, use your brakes, not your wheel. Now, if the animal is large, like a moose or a hog is very dangerous to your car too because they're stocky and big and low to the ground and causes a lot of rollover accidents. You might want to consider swerving. A collision with a moose, which can weigh up to 1,200 pounds, carries a significant risk of injury or even death. And if a large animal crash is inevitable, crouch as low as possible in your seat or under the dash, as large animals usually end up crushing the vehicle. However, like I mentioned, the hog here, yeah, you might want to swerve for that. That's not going to go over the vehicle, but most likely it's going to do a lot of damage underneath. So do I swerve? As I mentioned, you can suffer more damage, it could be monetary damage or physical damage from just swerving to miss an animal versus slowing down and decreasing the impact with the animal. I was in an accident with a deer before a long time, and it just rolled over. I mean, a lot of damage to the car. We hit it head on, and it rolled and crushed the windshield and took off. But it was, from what I can see, perfectly fine. So didn't harm the deer too bad, and it'll heal. But some people, we call this the mystery crash. I saw a dog, or I saw this, and now you're swerving and hitting a tree and causing a lot more damage than if we would just slow down and to decrease the impact. But it's something that our instincts do. So we just need to be aware. Understand, as long as you're aware to your options and try to minimize the amount of damage, like I mentioned, then that's what's going to be able to allow us to make the best decision. Nobody's out there trying to hit a deer, or I mentioned deer because those are popular in Texas, but no one's out there trying to hit animals. At least I hope not. But really be able to make those decisions, those cognitive decisions, appropriately for your situation. But if not, so it says here, it is best to lock the brakes, jam the horn if time's allowed. So jam the horn, scare the animal, try to get them to run away, and duck low behind the dashboard. Wildlife. Once again, to swerve or not to swerve, that is the question. Here's just some statistics on the actual damage that hitting a wildlife or hitting any type of animal can cause. So a collision with some form of wildlife occurs on average every 39 minutes. 1 out of every 17 car collisions involves wandering wildlife. 1 out of every 17. 89% of all wildlife collisions occur on roads with 2 lanes. So back to that view of, I said this is where most collisions happen, right there. And 84% of all wildlife collisions occur in good weather on dry roads. The average repair cost of a car-deer collision is $2,800, and I can justify that. I had a deer jump in my car, and it was right over $2,800 to get fixed. And approximately 200 motorists die in the United States each year from car-wildlife collisions. So what we can do here is limit the amount of time that we bring wildlife to the streets. And when we do find ourselves coming into contact with wildlife on the street, knowing our options either to swerve or not to swerve, and what's the best decision in that particular situation. And we're not just sharing the roads with wildlife out there. I've mentioned truck drivers, professional truck drivers a couple times now, and we share the roads with these semis. And I tell everyone this, if you ever have the opportunity to just sit in a big rig or ride along, do it. It will change the way you drive around them in the future. And I can almost bet you, because I'm telling you, most 2-axle drivers have never been in a semi, and it really shows on the roads. Right here it says, avoid driving the blind spots of big trucks. We're all aware of our cars, and every car has different blind spots. And that's part of the getting to know the vehicle and understanding what's different from vehicle to vehicle. However, one thing we have going for us is we can hear and see them, and that's not the same thing for them. They can't see and hear us as easily. There's a reason why they have those signs that says, if you can see this, I can't see you, on the back of their vehicle. So be aware of their blind spots and don't stay in them. Pass them. Get out of their blind spot. That puts us at more using safety measures more so in our advantage, and it actually helps us stay safer on the roads, because these big vehicles can cause a lot of damage. Blind spots aren't the only issue when it comes to big rigs. Big rigs take longer to stop than you do, so don't cut them off. Easier said than done. There's a lot of times we're sitting in traffic, needing to get over, but the thing to remember is we don't know what type of load they have. The heavier of a load, the longer it takes for them to stop. We're playing chicken here too, because like I mentioned, these trucks can cause a lot of damage, and there's nothing we can do about it. We're going to share the road with them, but make sure we're being safe. Have that cushion around us. Cutting off their following distance, I mean, they haven't, like I mentioned, we have no clue about the weight, so why are we going to do that to them? So just be respectful for the big rigs on the road. Know that they cause a lot of damage, and like I mentioned here, you never know what weight they're coming or they're traveling with. So on the left here, hit another car at 35 miles per hour versus on the right, underride at 35 miles per hour. I mean, just look at the difference. That's damage from a different car. You can still see the person, everybody's intact. Then on the right, the damage from a semi. You probably don't even know if that person's okay or not. Obviously, this is failure to control speed, but the damage from the same speed limit is, look at the difference. I mean, it really is eye-opening. So be aware of the type of vehicles that are around you. I mentioned the cushion, but it's really important. It's such a good idea to create a cushion around you. Have space to maneuver and change lanes. Give yourself an out, an exit, and don't forget about it. Try not to tailgate and stay away from other tailgaters as well, because tailgating alone causes and increases accidents by 50%. So here we are. How are we going to avoid these collisions? We're going to drive to conditions, drive friendly and be courteous, maintain a safe following distance, look both ways at all intersections, signal every turn and lane change, stop at those red or pink lights and stop signs, even though it says no stopping at any time. And don't drive if you've been drinking. Like we mentioned before, there's multiple factors when it comes to being a safer driver, but they are called accidents for a reason. And sometimes they happen. So when they occur, what do we do? What to do after a crash? The first priority is to make sure the scene is safe. So a lot of times you can see here it says check for injuries. However, make sure the scene is safe. We don't want to cause any additional harm to anyone or ourselves when attending an accident or helping an accident. So check for injuries. Are you okay? But make sure the scene is safe. Move your car out of the roadway to a safer place where you can exchange names, addresses, phone numbers, and all that other good information that we need to touch base later on at a different time. We like to talk about steer to clear. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was going through driver's ed, they would always say, don't move the vehicle, keep it where it's at. But that's changed now. We want to make sure that we're clearing the roads for other cars to go through and not causing more traffic. Because with that being said, people are going to be curious. We're born curious. So with that being said, move your cars off so we're not causing other people to be standstill or looking at in the direction of the accident and setting ourselves up to cause another accident. So we can do that by noting the location of the crash. A lot of us have phones that have camera capabilities, taking pictures. Take a quick picture before you move on. However, the important thing is secure the scene, checking for injuries, and then move your car out of the roadway if possible. But when do we call the police? Do the police need to be at every single accident? The answer is no. But you do always want to call the police if there's injuries or fatalities involved. You can't move the vehicle because somebody's got to help you stop traffic or get a tow truck involved. You suspect one of the drivers is intoxicated, one of the drivers has no insurance, and one of the drivers leaves the scene. I'd like to add one more here. And if you ever feel unsafe, there's, like I mentioned, there's fear and aggression. And sometimes when we find ourselves in accidents, it's not the happiest time. So you might have some fear. Maybe the other individual is obviously isn't going to be happy, but has a little bit more aggression than makes you feel comfortable. So that's another one to add to the list if you don't feel safe. Here goes into more detail and steer to clear. So if you were in a collision and no one is hurt, don't wait for the police. If you're still calling the police for any of those reasons or for any reason at all that they're needed, you don't need to wait for them to move your vehicle. So if you can drive your vehicle, the law actually requires you to move it out of the flow of traffic. You see a lot of signs, especially in Houston, that say steer to clear. But that's basically just setting it up for the other drivers on the road to be able to maintain that flow of traffic, to keep the roads as safe as possible for other drivers, to limit the amount of accidents that might occur after the one that just happened. But when to file a crash report? So if a law enforcement officer is not investigating, so we didn't need them, no big deal. You must file a report with TxDOT within 10 days if any of the following conditions apply. So if there's injuries or a fatality, you suspect property damage that exceeds $1,000, you suspect a driver is intoxicated, unlicensed, and has no insurance or attempts to leave the scene. And if you don't file a report after 10 days, you're subject to up to a $500 fine plus court costs. Now, coming from the insurance industry, I would say always file a crash report, period. Right, so the car care checklist. Now, I am in no means a mechanic, but I do have to say, I know when things are off in my car, and I'm getting better at not ignoring the indicator lights as well. So we have a pretty established relationship, and even though it hurts maybe my pocket or my wallet when it comes to car, I do know it's important. And these are not the only things to take care of your car, but I like to point out these are the main and minimal things we can do as drivers to ensure our cars are in safe driving condition. So the main 4 things here are the oil change, tires, battery, and wiper blades. Like I said, these are the 4 minimum things, but we'll look into these individually. Oil safety. When it comes to oil, I sometimes feel like I'm going out of my boundaries here because I can't say I know everything about oil, but I do know that the oil changes are important. And it's important to have them done regularly, but why is this so important? So with oil changes, it says from the slide about getting them done every 7,500 miles between oil changes. And some people go 3,000 to 5,000 miles, but I think you could go based on the sticker in the corner of your car. But you can actually check the oil yourself and see if it's dirty. So clean oil looks like tea or like iced tea, and dirty oil looks like a little bit like coffee. So we just want to make sure all of our oil is looking more on the tea side. But in my situation, I'm going to leave it up to the mechanic. I'm going to keep my sticker in the corner up to date and just know the importance of, or why it's so important to keep the oil changes going regularly. Well, in fact, changing your oil offers a lot of noticeable benefits. It helps with gas mileage and also helps keep the engine working and actually the way it's supposed to. Basically, it keeps it from like wearing and tearing so much since it doesn't have to work so hard. And there's some more expensive types of oil, but for the most part, oil changes aren't really expensive and they don't take long. Especially now, you can make a quick little appointment, and I think many places offer 30-minute oil changes, and often they have coupons and specials, and I love them coupons. But just like any other maintenance, taking the time to change your oil and change it regularly will save you more time and money down the road. But what about tires? Tire safety. Now, I've had some issues previously with tires. I had a Chevy Cruze and lights always came on. I didn't understand why it would say my tire pressure was low. But what it did make me do is realize and understand what my tire pressure was supposed to be. It's important that we take into effect just because not every car is the same and not every tire is the same. So there's going to be differences in the tire pressure depending on the vehicle. Not only is tire pressure going to be different from vehicle to vehicle and from tire to tire, and we can find what the PSI should be on the side of our vehicle, like in the door or in our owner's manual, and I think they even put it on the actual tire sometimes. But knowing that the weather outside has a big effect on your tire pressure. So it says tires lose 1 to 2 pounds of air pressure for every 10 degrees of temperature drops outside. And we know we live in Texas, and sometimes we can have all 4 seasons in one day. Lucky us. Therefore, it's best to check your tire pressure regularly because you never know when it might be low. And if you're anything like me and the indicator light comes on, then pay attention to it. But have your tire gauge in your car as part of we'll get to our emergency kits later, but make sure we're just aware. It's the most important thing to be aware of what our tire pressure should be. Here's an old trick I like to share. A lot of people know about this one, but it says use the penny, it's good. It's the legal minimum tread depth, and then the quarter. It's probably time to replace your tires. When I was driving to Texas from Georgia, I had a friend stop and say, "You're going to get new tires, right?" And I just didn't realize how bald they were getting. And it's dangerous. With tires, you really have to pay attention and make sure we're checking them, not just, regularly, but every time we get in our vehicle. Because anything could happen. Conditions change. So make sure we're being aware of our vehicles so we're being safe on the road, right? Like I mentioned, when I was driving from Georgia to Texas, it was hot. If I hadn't changed my tires, I probably would have been putting myself at a really high risk of having a blowout. And I mentioned before, that was the most scariest thing, so I don't want to deal with that. So that being said, make sure we're just double checking all of our tires every time we enter into a vehicle. Washer fluid, windshields. It's how we see. It's really important. If we can't see, how do we know where we're going, what's in front of us? So smeared windshields create visibility hazards and also makes glares from light source worse day or at night. So when it comes to washer blades or fluid, they're both important. We need to make sure we have all of them. We don't want to make sure the blades are working appropriately and make sure just in case here you can see on this windshield is like bugs or dust, and we're in Texas, we have a lot of bugs, and especially like in East Texas or West Texas, there's dust storms. You want to be caught in a dust storm and not have washer fluid to make sure that you're seeing as well as possible while driving. So ensure that you have enough windshield washer fluid when you travel, and not just when you travel, but at any time. And more importantly, make sure those blades are correct too. Now, I mentioned having a tire gauge and a roadside emergency kit, but I think we all need a roadside emergency kit to keep us company on any time we're in a vehicle. It's always a good idea to have one in your car. I'm actually working on getting mine still put together right now, so I want to share with you a few things you might want to add to yours or put into your ones that you're probably going to create after this course. All right, so we have our cell phone charger, first aid kit, reflective triangles, foam tire sealant, multi-purpose tool, like the Swiss Army knives that are really cool. Water, make sure you have some water, protein bars, an ice scraper, kitty litter to help with traction, tarp or a poncho, some rags, maybe to wipe off the windshield if you didn't have enough fluid, a fan to keep us cool in the Texas heat, some jumper cables, or even a blanket. Now, these are all great things to have, and I'm sure everyone's different. They might need something for their particular situation or individual needs. So this is just a minor list. So you might not need some of these, or you might add some to it. But the important thing is to make sure you have one. You don't want to be stuck in an emergency on the side of the road and not have one. Now here, I personally have an iPhone, not sure, but luckily with all the technology and the Android and the iPhones and the Blueberries and the Redberries and the Blackberries, whatever phone you have, they usually are keeping up with each other. But for all you iPhone users out there, there's something in your phone called a medical ID. If you don't have it set up already, I suggest you do. What's really important here is you can tell here is we have John Appleseed, and his emergency contact is Chloe Appleseed. So not only is this information in here, like his medical notes and his allergies and medications and everything of that for the first responders, but since he has Chloe Appleseed in here, if he say he was in an accident on the side of the road and he's stuck, he can't get out of his seatbelt or anything. Well, he's actually able to talk to his phone and maybe say, "Hey Siri, call 911." Well, when he does that, Miss Chloe Appleseed right here is actually notified that he has sent out for medical attention. Then if you have more technology, like maybe a location on your phone, Miss Appleseed knows exactly where John Appleseed is at the time of an emergency. But that's just way down. I didn't know it did that, so I like to share that with people, just how important this is. Definitely one of those roadside emergency tools that isn't used as well as it could be. So I like to share that with you, get familiar with it, add in there, because now if a first responder comes, they know that what kind of medications he has, so they don't do anything to make the matters worse. This is a really cool tool that you have right in your hand with your phone. Safe driving tip. You probably know this little icon, little ghost. It's a Waze app, but there's multiple GPS apps for us to use. But this one grew high in popularity, and like I mentioned, called Waze. But I use it for this presentation because I am aware with it. And not only does it tell you how to get from point A to point B, but it also keeps up to date with anything going around. So there was an accident reported and traffic stalled, so it might take you a different way, not further limiting the amount of road rage you might be feeling. Not only that, but it also tells you if patrol cars are set up. And at first I was like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose. But if you look at the bigger picture, then, okay, now I know patrol cars there. I'm already slowing down. So it's actually helping us be safer. Well, more importantly, use a GPS, know your road conditions, utilize your tools. There's so many tools out there. Like I said, this isn't the only GPS tool for us to use. But knowing, I'm so glad that we don't have to use maps anymore or print out papers and have to be looking down. It actually talks to us. So utilize these tools that they're providing us to be safer out on the roads. Safe driving tips. Before driving a car, do a simple safety check. Check those tires. Check the lights. Look for any fluid or leaks or things hanging under the vehicle. Adjust the mirrors and the seats. Furthermore, use your turn signal and don't really tell people to use theirs. Keep your eyes moving or keep your head on a swivel. Look behind you. We said keep your eyes on the road, not just in front, but on the sides and in the back. And adjust to those road conditions. Understand how much longer it's going to take us to stop in rain or snow versus on the dry road. We are doing this class a little bit differently these days, and I look forward to seeing you in a classroom situation. However, my main thing here is if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to send me an email or give me a call, and I'll provide all my information here shortly. But the most important thing that I hope you took away from this class is to be attentive and drive responsibly. These are the two primary components to safe driving. I hope you were able to take away a few things, maybe prevent a couple accidents that don't need to be happening. But most importantly, best thing we can do is stay safe out there. Be attentive and be aware of our own surroundings. Thank you for joining me today for this course. My name is Courtney Page, and here is my information. If you have any questions at all, any comments, any concerns, any feedback, or just want to send me a joke, I love driving jokes. I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you have a great day. And most importantly, stay safe out there.